Well, hello everyone, and welcome to yet another session of Café New Canadians. Café New Canadians, as you know, is a virtual event series, and this particular session is brought to you by New Canadians in collaboration with ACCESS Employment, a leading immigrant serving organization in the Greater Toronto Area. Now, I'm sure most of you know about New Canadians. Let me still tell you a little about us. We are a TV and web-based show that connects newcomers to valuable information related to immigration, settlement, employment, education, entrepreneurship, just about everything that can be of use to newcomers in Canada. We air weekly episodes on Omni TV, and you can also watch us on our YouTube channel, and you can watch us on our website. For today's session, I'm your host, Shruti Dargan, and I'm pleased to welcome our guest speakers. We've got three people joining us today. Peter Hawkins, who's the co-owner of MELLOHAWK Logistics Inc. Shikhi Jain, who is a platinum client specialist in healthcare at Purolator, and Han Tran, a director at bridging services at ACCESS Employment. So as I said earlier, we've got one employer in supply chain, we've got someone who is an internationally trained professional in supply chain, and someone who is working at this bridging program that assists newcomers and internationally trained professionals over here in their career development and in their success in their career path. So welcome everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so happy to actually have you on the session today, and looks like it's really going to be an interesting one. Supply chain, of course, is a department which is really important in any company. And today's topic, as we mentioned, it's access to employment in supply chain. Now, of course, there are a lot of questions that people have in mind related to what is the situation in Canada, specifically in light of COVID-19 right now. And in general, I mean, newcomers, when they come to Canada, when they move over here, they have certain dreams, expectations, career expectations. Some of them work out, some of them don't really work out. Let's focus on what exactly does supply chain industry in Canada or the supply chain department in Canada offer to newcomers. We'll start with you, Peter.
Sure.
Tell us a little about what are the expectations that someone in supply, or when you interview people, maybe for your company, or when you come across newcomers, what are the top skills? Let's just first focus on what are the top skills that one would expect in an individual.
Sure. So a couple of things I want to hit on just before we enter into job skills, and that is, as an employer, I can only see things from an employer point of view. And I am the only Canadian-born person in my company. Everybody is from somewhere else. So the first thing that I like to see is no Canadian experience. And so the reason why I say that is what I love is somebody who has a wealth of knowledge geographically, knows the world, and is not afraid of dealing with territories and lanes that we would never consider for the people who are born in the Maritimes, in Ontario, or in the prairies or out west in Canada. So the first thing I want is international exposure. I want them to be able to see the world and not be afraid. But otherwise, it is very simple. I want people to pursue qualifications because there's always ongoing training. I want them to be good at math, and I want them to be good communicators. So multilingual is a real asset for us all over the place. And we have a high standard too. So even though people are, everybody's speaking English as a second language, I expect the English to be as good as they possibly can. So we have an ongoing process with that because I can't speak another language, but I will, and most of my staff can speak multiple languages, but we still expect things to be as typo-free as possible. And the main reason why is, there's actually two reasons. Supply chain is detail. You've got to get the details right. But supply chain also means you must understand prepositions, to and from. Because if it goes the wrong direction, you've lost it. It's a disaster. So the skill base, I think, is a very reasonable, relatively simple skill base. It is all the other things you can bring to it that'll set you apart.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with Peter on that. We work with various employers, and so the skill that they're looking for is, I know we're talking about supply chain, but this across all sectors really. we talk about future skills. And what that means is, what is the employers are looking for? What is the future going to look like? There's disruptive technologies coming in. And so we want to look at skills such as critical thinking, creative problem solving, innovation, communication, self-awareness, and of course, emotional intelligence. And the reason why is because things are shifting, and so you will need to be adaptable and move from department to department, sector to sector. And so those are the skills that we're looking for, not only supply chain, but everywhere else. And those future skills are what we're looking for, or employers are looking for.
Definitely. Thank you to both of you for actually, chipping in on that. And before we start discussing more about it, there's something that I'd like to tell our viewers that, we'll be taking questions from you today and answering them live. So if you're joining us on Zoom, you can share your questions in the Q&A tab. If you're joining us on YouTube, where we're also live streaming this webinar, you could post them in the chat box. And as and when we see these questions and during this discussion, we'll keep answering them. Of course, now, Peter, you pointed out something which is Canadian experience. You said that, that's something that you don't look for and in an individual. I'm guessing, Shikhi, when you moved over here, it feels like right now is the right moment to actually talk about Canadian experience before we get deeper into this conversation. What was your experience as a newcomer when you moved over here? And specifically in supply chain or otherwise through other friends and family that you may have known over here, what has the experience been like?
Okay, so primarily I will talk from the supply chain perspective, and it's very interesting that you brought friends and family, because when I talk about friends and family, and I have a couple of them over here, and many of the immigrants who moved there, they have. But in my case, 95% of them are directly or indirectly are working into IT industry. So my biggest, hurdle, first of all, was to, have somebody whom I can talk supply chain language, right? So this was something, a roadblock for me, because if I talk operations, logistics, procurement, export, import, nobody from my IT background, good family members or friends, nobody understand it. The hiring process which they have experienced, it's very different from what is required in supply chain. So this is something, and for example, IT skills, right? If you're a Java developer or a tester, the skill set primarily you sit anywhere around the globe and you're doing, and that's where offshore, onshore model works for a lot of IT companies, and they, offshore their projects to Asian countries or other geographies. But supply chain is something very local. In the nature itself is local for a lot of functions, I would say. So that is where, your Canadian experience, I think that has become slightly relevant. But of course, the transferable skills are global, like anywhere you are sitting, like Peter mentioned, right? Good communication skills or good in analytical skills, that is global, right? Irrespective of where you are sitting or, but yes, talking about maritimes or prairies or the Canadian geography is something which is very Canadian experiences, I think, which differentiate from your global experience.
Can I jump in on there too?
Definitely.
One of the things that you have to pay attention to is when you're being interviewed, sometimes you're being interviewed by somebody who's lazy and they're just checking off boxes and they've got a knee-jerk reaction to this no Canadian experience thing. Supply chain is full of people with international experience and foreign trained professionals who have vastly more impressive credentials than so many people who are born here in Canada. And they've already made the huge jump across the world. So I always try to encourage candidates, foreign trained candidates, to be confident. If you are confident about your skills, and if you can convey that confidence, you can help someone who is interviewing you see you in the job. Because what they want is they want somebody who can do the job and not be a hassle. Okay, and so I believe the no Canadian experience thing is trying to figure out if you're a hassle. And so if I have to teach you to wear deodorant or to be nice to women or the things that are just so clearly obvious to this marketplace, then you're a hassle. And then I think it's really those kinds of things. I think it is not a case that that Canadian experience is relevant in supply chain. Yes, we have domestic supply chains, of course we do, but we also have global supply chains, and they need global experts. However, you have to figure it out when you're asking questions, and an interview process goes two ways. So if you are being asked questions, you can certainly ask questions. And if somebody says, I'm looking for somebody with more Canadian experience, you could say, well, do you need Canadian certifications? Are you worried that I don't know the marketplace? Or you don't know that I don't know the business culture? Or are you a racist? Okay, you can't go that far, but you can certainly think it, because I think it's true. And what I want is, if you can be confident and if you can be diplomatic, for me, that makes the Canadian experience question, it proves how irrelevant the Canadian experience question is.
True, because the employers, we know we have around 350 new immigrants coming to Canada, maybe not during this time, but in general, coming to Canada every year. And so employers see the value of internationally trained professionals. They have departments, they have pillars that are part of their mandate. For example, diversity and inclusion department area. And so they are looking for newcomers, they are looking for women, they are looking for minorities for qualified individuals to fill these positions. So Canadian experience is becoming less and less important. I think what's really important that for candidates to answer when they do get that question, which usually is not the case, but if they do, I think it's really important for the individual. It's very, yes, it's very, very, you know, in the surface there. It's important for the individual to compare and make that comparison for the employer. Like Peter was saying, they're lazy. They really don't know company A, B, C back home in your country, because they're not aware of that company. And so as a candidate, you can say, well, I worked for a company ABC, like a company here in Canada with this revenue, with this source, with these many customers, and this is what I did. And so you make that link for them, and I think the employer becomes much more impressive, and the Canadian experience become less and less important. So that's really something to consider when you're interviewing.
So relevant. That well, what you described is just crucial. Yeah, sorry.
I was just saying that thank you to Peter and Han, you know, these thoughts that you've shared related to Canadian experience. I couldn't agree with you more. I applaud these thoughts. And I think it's also, I'm sure the people that are joining us today from different parts of the world over here right now, it's given them a lot of confidence as well. You know, this is a major roadblock that unfortunately a lot of people face in their careers in Canada when they're trying to start something here. And your thoughts, your tips, I'm sure they'll come in really handy. So Han, coming to you, now of course we've talked about an internationally trained professional, we've talked about skills from the point of view of an employer. You're in a service that helps, that basically bridges that gap, brings the two parties together. So tell us a little about, you know, your role with ACCESS Employment, and tell us about the bridging program that helps assist newcomers.
Right. So my role at ACCESS, the official title is Director of Bridging Services. For those who are not familiar with bridging, it is exactly that you can imagine a bridge of what you do in your country, and we fill that gap and try to find you find you commensurate work here in Canada. And we have several bridging programs. Supply chain is one of them. And the great thing about supply chain is we do a few things. Number one, we work with actually Sheridan College to provide the Canadian context to it. So they teach things like Canadian customs, international law, international trade, for example. So you walk away with an affiliation with an academic partner when you come into the Supply Chain Connections program. There are various employer engagement activities. So we have guest speakers like Peter to come in to talk to the group about anything, employer expectations, interview process, culture. So it's a great way to network. We also have experiential learning. So we talk to employers and say, we have a business challenge, you have a business challenge, bring that to our participants, and our participants will work with the academic partner and coaches, and they will provide you solutions. A couple things happen. The employer gets to look at talent before they even want to hire and commit to hiring. So it's a great way to network and for the employer to look at the talent. And for the participant, you get to expand your networks, understand Canadian contacts, and get that quote unquote Canadian work experience because you've worked on a real live project for an employer here in Canada. And of course, we help you with coaches. So once you get a job, our job is not done. We want to make sure you stay in the job. So we have a coach that meets with you one-on-one if you need, to ensure that you pass that probationary period, because we want you to stay in that job. So there are so many areas that we do. It'll take forever, but I would suggest to connect with us and we'll provide you with that information and go into an information session. We'll provide you a lot more details of the program. Yeah,
is
I hope that kind of gives you a snapshot.
Han, is it just for PRs or is it for what's the status? Can work permits take
status? Yeah,
this?
Work permit, a valid work permit. Refugee, convention refugees, permanent residents, Canadians, but naturalized Canadians when you don't have any Canadian work experience. So a lot of people will come here, do a survival job, and then through that process will become a Canadian, but they haven't worked in Canada in their relevant field, even though they work back home. Don't worry, we can still help you bridge that gap.
Terrific. And I just want to give a kudo, sorry to interrupt here, but a kudo to ACCES. So people sometimes, I notice the Sheridan ACCES partnership, but they'll focus on the Sheridan aspect and not the ACCES part. And I'm actually the chair of the Professional Advisor Committee for Sheridan College Highland School of Business, and I'm a mentor at ACCES Employment. And I have to tell you that both are valuable. As soon as I see ACCES on a resume or on a LinkedIn profile, I know that they have been pre-screened and trained and coached so that I don't have to deal with all the crap. And that, I think, is something that people are forgetting, that the ACCES brand is very, very valuable, because somebody who might want to be reluctant to take a chance on somebody, they would be further convinced because of the things that ACCES can bring to the table and has already brought to the table with the candidate. So Han, I want to take my hat off to you because I think you guys do a fantastic job. And you are the result of it.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Definitely. And Peter, I'd like to thank you for also actually helping me with my job over here by moderating and asking this question that Juliana had asked us in the chat section over here. I would request that the viewers joining us, if you could share your questions in the Q&A tab instead, that would make sure that we don't end up missing out a question in these chats that we have over here. So keep posting your questions in the Q&A tab and we'll definitely answer them soon. So moving on, and thank you to all. Actually, it's a lively discussion, and this is exactly how it should be. So moving on from here, for internationally trained professionals. Now, I can see in the chat over here as well, people are joining us from different parts of the world. And when someone moves over here in Canada, like I said earlier, there are expectations about their careers. There's also a lot of misinformation. So it's a lot of times people just assume that maybe, okay, I've been a supply chain professional in, say, another part, my home country, and I have this experience, I have these skills. We've touched upon them very briefly. But there's this fear that maybe these are not the skills that really work out in Canada. Let's talk a little about that, or from all three of you. I'd like to know your view on, do you think the Canadian supply chain industry would be different from how it functions in any other part of the world? Or what are the other transferable skills that one could use? Let's talk about that a little. Who'd like to start?
Okay.
Yes, sure.
I'm loud, I'll start. So the actual job is the same around the world, okay? The actual activity is the same. If you can do the job in Kuwait, you can do the job here, okay? So that's number one, that's terrific. If you know Incoterms, they're the same around the world. An airway bill is the same around the world. So that part is very clear. The getting the job is different. In so many cultures, the best educated person gets the job. The highest marks gets the job. That is not what happens here. The person who can do the job with the most likability gets the job. So it is a two-pronged situation that people have to work with here. By building up their network and building up their confidence, they're building up their likability, building up their soft skills. Those are invaluable into landing the job. The doing the job, you absolutely have to have the skills. You need to have the certifications. You need to have the education. Absolutely. But getting there is so much more about everything else. And it's funny because when I talk to, like Han, you know, when I'm talking to groups and I'm discovering who has a handshake and who doesn't. Of course, now nobody has a handshake, but half the world does not have a handshake. And Canadians have a unique way of communicating. And part of that is with a handshake that's right in the middle. And part of that is with the never saying no and the never being negative. So if you have a meeting with somebody and it's an interview and they say, "You're terrific. I'm so glad you came in. I think you're wonderful. Thanks so much." That's no. That's no. You didn't get the job. I can tell you that right away. And of course, it doesn't sound like a no. Everybody's waiting for the call. And I'm thinking, you didn't get a call. Of course not. And so understanding those nuances of Canadian culture is a real surprise to people. In our company, I think we hire for skill, but we hire for attitude. I want somebody who has a sense of urgency, eagerness, enthusiasm, collaborative ability, a sense of humor. We're all funny here. We spend a lot of time together. But also pays attention to details. And I want them to have a high standard. And I measure that standard before I even see them by how they do their LinkedIn profile. How much detail is involved? How well did they follow the instructions? How well did they follow the instructions to apply? All of those things are showing me whether or not they are the candidate for me before I have even looked at a resume or, you know, seen the whites of their eyes. A little off topic there, sorry.
Yes. Han, what about you?
Sorry, I know that Shikhi was just about to talk. Sorry, before
Yes.
I kind of
I'm
collect
so sorry.
my thoughts.
I didn't notice that.
That's okay.
Okay. No, so just adding to Peter's point, and like he rightly mentioned, supply chain remains same throughout the world. And but what makes Canadian recruitment process different is something which we don't realize is reading between the lines. Like you said, Canadians will always be super polite, right? A lot of times you don't get the context of what they are referring to. And like he said, you know, a likability factor is very, very much important. Reason being, they do not want to hire a person who is fantastic in his work, but, you know, do not go well with the team members, because ultimately, at least in supply chain, it's a lot about stakeholder management, because supply chain, you know, sales will remain sales everywhere. Operations will, and sales operation tussle will always be there, right? Globally. But how do you handle those? And that is where exactly it differs. And stakeholder management is something they look very, very strongly. You might be a little slightly, you know, not, I would not say not up to the, you know, job on your number crunching, you will get there. It's trainable, but your stakeholder management is something which comes inherently and what they look at. Also, I think, you know, small nuances, and that is where I want to go back to ACCES, and where he, you know, like Peter mentioned, ACCES trains on certain, you know, very fine details. Back home, I have always been trained to use 1 lakh, 1 crore as, let's say, number, just a very small example. It took me like months to, you know, switch to 100,000. So, you know, start saying 100,000 instead of saying, you know, 1 lakh, or start saying millions instead of lakhs. So small things, very, very extremely small things. Like a couple of months back on my job, I put the comma on the number. So this is very Canadian context. And the more you spend time with organization and bridging programs, it kind of helps you to boost up and, you know, make you more relatable. And that is what I think employers also look for, in addition to your education and your certifications.
It's so true. I know that a lot of the chat questions revolve around certifications. Do I need this certification? Do I need that certification to work in supply chain? Well, it's an unregulated profession here in Canada, so you don't need a specific designation in order to do the job. Of course, it's nice to have, but it's not the reason to get that job. And I think when newcomers especially don't get that job, their first thought is, I need more education. I need to do more certifications. But really, at the end of the day, it's that people skills. what Peter and Shikhi were talking about. It's really, really important that you really know how to network. Build your social capital. Get and meet people, because that's how you're going to get the job, not an additional designation, another certification. So it's, again, it's great to have, but it is not the answer to get a job. So networking is key.
While we're discussing certifications, let's take a few audience questions related to that. I think then you would be able to specify if these are certifications that are required or not. We've got a question from Rafael, who is joining us from Brazil. He says he's planning to arrive in Canada by December 2020. The question is that, is it good to have a CIFFA certificate, such as International Transportation and Trade or Essentials of Freight Forwarding, in order to get a better job position? And
Can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So on that one, so those are the first two CIFA courses, and then there's two more. That's the first certificate, then there's the second certificate.
Yes.
Everyone in my office, including the receptionist, has the full program. 2/3 of the office have graduated with honors, and we have a whole wall of over 40 certificates for everybody to show off all their skills there. If you don't have that, we pay for it. That's all there is to it. And on top of that, we actually have a private career college where we teach it. But in addition to CIFA, which I love, and that's my preferred, but as Han knows, there are many other programs. And so you folks are using CITT. Which one are you using that you're promoting, Han?
In supply chain?
Yeah, I think you folks are partnering with Sheridan. Sheridan's using CITT, I think.
I'm not quite sure the certification there, but yeah, we do academic, but not to offer the certification. Are you saying that one?
No, not that you're offering, but just the fact that you're promoting it. So, so let me just to the person asking the question: are the certifications of value? 100%. For us, we want you to have that, and if you don't have it coming in and you have everything else, we'll pay for it so that you do have it. But if you can learn Incoterms, seriously, just start with Incoterms 2020. That's a huge start. And if you've done the job in your home country for a year or 2 years, that's a huge start. I really totally agree with Han that it's the networking skills, it's all those other things that are much more important. We do want you to learn how to do the job. You're going to get dangerous goods training. You're going to get air training and ocean training, and learn how to calculate freight costs and volumetric weight and all those things for trucking. But they are not crucial to getting a job, but they are the extra things that would certainly help. And anything you can do to add to your LinkedIn profile to boost that up is great. I still believe that, like Han, it is the networking, but it's also the packaging. If you can make your LinkedIn profile professional, if you can make your resume professional in the Canadian style, that's the way to do it.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about certifications? There's another question from Gurjeet over here related to that. What about, how helpful are the ASCM certifications like CPIM and CSCP? What about that?
Both valuable and fantastic, but not crucial.
And like you said, I mean, of course, these are words of encouragement. I can see lots of thank yous coming in as well to all of you for these words of encouragement, for these insights. And, this boosts confidence in people that, yes, okay, these certifications make a difference, but this is not just all that is required. It's you, your personality, your hard work, your skills, all of those come into play. And of course, certifications can just elevate your chances of success from there. Did I interrupt when I think Shikhi, you were about to talk? Or?
No, not me. Oh, Shikhi.
No.
All right. So let's take another question over here. This is from Anubhav Gandhi. Again, thanking all of you for the support. And the question is that it is often posted in job requirements that they need experience of 1 to 2 years. Is that they're asking for Canadian experience or worldwide experience? That's the question. So we've discussed Canadian experience in detail, but when it doesn't really specify where this experience must have been earned, would you recommend that a person talks about their experience in a job in their home country, or how can one tackle that question, wherein there is this unsure kind of a space?
I think number one is going back to confidence. You really need to know that you have the skills, you have the experience, and the education in order to tackle that job. And job postings are a wish list from employers. They might not even have it for their employees yet, but this is a wish list. So if a lot of people think that they don't have 100% and don't apply, please do apply, because there is a chance that you might get called for an interview. So that's just a wish list, and come in being confident, and come in not thinking of a deficit, meaning, oh, I don't have Canadian experience, I don't have 3 years, I don't have this degree. It really you need to change your mindset to say, I can do this, I have the experience, I'm confident, and if I don't know it, guess what? I'm gonna learn and be able to excel in it. And so when you show that confidence to an employer, and they know that you have a little gap in whichever area in their wish list, they will want to pull you into the second stage or even offer you hiring. So it's really important to get away from that deficit thinking. Think of it as you're good and you're more than qualified to do that job. So don't think too much into the details of the number of years and experience and whatever's on that job posting.
I want to ask Shikhi a question about that then. How, when you landed your first job, how well did you match the ad?
Well, so if I say match 100%, no, not at all. I think it was largely 80%. I'm currently working for logistics and courier industry, right? My past experience is into shipping, into e-commerce, into consulting, right? Nothing from, but are the skills transferable? And they categorically mentioned somebody from logistics industry. I'm not from logistics. I don't know iota about FSA or postal codes or anything. But again, the role itself, is it trainable? Am I trainable? That is what I need to demonstrate. And that's what exactly I demonstrated during my telephonic, my face-to-face. And that's exactly what they want to see. Even if, let's say you are from logistics industry, but you are not trainable, I don't think so. It will sail the boat.
Well, first of all, I think you're 100% in the logistics industry, because logistics is all around you. Everything in your living room came because of logistics. Everything in my office here became because of logistics. So that's my first response to that. But my second response is to the person who was wondering about the 1 to 2 years, that mysterious little area. The ad is an ideal description. Okay, they've thrown everything they could possibly think of in that ad for a job. Will they use all those things in that ad? No, they won't. Of course not. So nobody is a perfect fit for the ad, although you may be a perfect fit for the job. So what I urge you is, if your experience, as Han said, and you have confidence in your experiences in your home country, absolutely talk about it. I just want to comment, there was the note, somebody wrote a very lovely message, but pointed out that when they when the interviewer found out the experience was in Nigeria, they lost interest. That interviewer is an idiot. Nigeria is one of the fastest growing economies. The demand is huge. The skill base is high. The education level is high. All I can do is apologize on behalf of the idiot you talked to today, because you, in fact, have, it sounds to me like you've got all the right things. And I'm very disappointed that you had to go through that experience. But I think what you should have learned from this experience is you're better than they are, and you've got to have more confidence next time. So I just want to throw that out to you there, that it is a big world of very complex and interesting economies, and people are very short-sighted if where you're from becomes the reason they don't want to pay attention to you.
One of the skills I want to note, one of the skills I want to note to the job seekers online here is there's a tool, if you're not aware of it, it's called Job Scan. So Job Scan. So what you do is you look at the job posting, you paste it in, you upload your resume, and Job Scan, what it does is does a match for you. So it'll say 60% match to the job. And so what you can do as a job seeker is to say, what are they looking for, and how can I translate that into my resume so that when it goes through an applicant tracking system, then your resume gets pulled up to the top of the list. So Job Scan is a great tool. not to inflate your skills, but to adjust to your resume so that it is matching the job posting. So JobScan is a great resource.
I want to throw one thing out, and I'm going to embarrass somebody right now, but Abdul Ganiyu, you've written about why it's so difficult to get a supply chain job. That one sentence has showed me why it's so difficult for you to get a supply chain job. Your punctuation is wrong and there's no capitalization. That showed me you don't pay attention to detail. Now, I believe you do pay attention to detail, and in fact, I think you are probably an excellent candidate. But what you have presented, the only thing I can judge you by, is not satisfactory. So, and by the way, after this, I want anybody who wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, please do, because I'm more than happy to give a little coaching to encourage you to figure out what you need to do, and then hand you over to Han.
We'll take them. So again, talking about the deficit thought, think that it is possible to find employment in supply chain, and you will. So if it isn't, then you really need to be self-aware what you're doing. That needs to be adjusted. And of course, ACCESS can help you. Mentors can help you. People like Peter, who's very generous with his time, can help you. And alumni like Shikhi can help you. So think about what the process that you're going through and what you're doing, and saying, what am I doing wrong here? And what can I change? Instead of saying, what's wrong with the supply chain sector?
And Han, it can be the smallest thing. People are creating obstacles where there shouldn't be any obstacles, only because they don't know how they're being measured. And if it's about the details, it's about the networking, it's about the likability, then improve those things. If you're using JobScan and you're not fitting the job, find out how to translate, just exactly as Han said.
Oh, sure. I can see a lot of questions still about certifications, about what are the skills that are required. We've, of course, covered most of those, but let's just recap a few things here for the people who may have joined us a little later. What are the top things that you would recommend, or what is it that one must keep in mind as an internationally trained professional applying in supply chain here in Canada? What's their mantra for success here? I'll go one by one. Shikhi, we'll start with you. Maybe the top 3 tips that you have to share, and that way.
First of all, I think I really had this in mind when I was invited, and I thought that I'll definitely put this point across, and it's definitely my point of view. People from supply chain who are looking for employment as a new immigrant in Canada, or please do leverage services like ACCESS Bridging Program. And why I say that, I'm not, advertising or marketing ACCESS. I tell you why. Eventually everybody is going to find job or work or employment one way or the other. As I mentioned, in the beginning, when I came here, 95% of the people I know are from IT industry. I don't have anybody. I was feeling so lost for, at least 2 or 3 weeks that, just to find a person whom I can talk to about supply chain, I didn't have anyone. The moment I joined, ACCESS Employment, at least there were 20 faces in the classroom who were talking supply chain language, and that itself gave me so much comfort and that safe zone, that there are people who are in this industry and who can relate with me, and so that's just a support group that you get from ACCESS Employment, and that is, I cannot even emphasize enough how much it helped me. Although within 1 week of joining ACCESS Employment, I got my job offer. That's another story altogether. So second very important thing is never shy away from volunteering. And that is something we are not at all trained to do back in our home country. I mean, at least I've never done volunteering anywhere. If you're not doing volunteering, something pro bono, programs like ACCESS Employment, like Han mentioned, there are experiential learning projects, right, that we work on. Now, the benefit, first of all, is it, of course, rebrushes your basics and all. Second, very important point, which touches base upon, when you're working with a group of team members, you are working from people from a diverse background, which you may or may not have done in your past experience. You might have worked with a domestic set of people, right? So this is one thing, because you're working with different nationalities. So kind of, it's, warming up before getting to the actual job. Second, very important, you get to know the skill set. So like I mentioned, I got my job, and after I think 5 weeks of me working there, my manager reached out to me and asked for a reference. Now, I already knew like 30 people, right, who were in supply chain. Now, if I have to refer to somebody, I would refer to somebody whose work I have personally seen, rather than somebody who has just written to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, can you get me a job or refer me somewhere? Because it's my, their word against mine. It would be like that. But if I've personally seen their work on any of these projects, then I would know, okay, this person knows this skill set and will be a good fit. So I actually referred to one of my teammates with whom I did my project, because I knew like he would be the perfect fit, and he landed with a job. So this is something very important. So please don't shy away from volunteering, and if you haven't done, please start doing. Very important to do these projects. That's all.
And were those jobs advertised? Like, because that's the other thing too. So many jobs are not advertised, and you were able to refer somebody from an in-house position, right? Yeah. I love that. Wow, good story. You need to do a commercial with her, okay, Han?
We'd be happy to do it.
Yeah.
Peter, you want to go, or do you three?
No, you go ahead, Han, and then I'll do a little wrap up.
Okay, sure, great. If I were to choose three, I would say networking is really important, and it's something to consider when you're networking. You're not there to ask for a job. I know it sounds counterintuitive because you're looking for a job, but they already know you're looking for a job. You don't need to say you're looking for a job. What you really want to do is create a genuine relationship with that person. And guess what? After you've put effort into it, it might be a week, a month, 2 years later, somebody will refer you that job. So networking is really important to foster. So that's number one. And don't first thing ask for a job. Number two, don't be too narrow in your focus. So a lot of people will come in to look to Canada and say, oh, I've got 10 years of experience. I'm going to find a job in 2 seconds. And I'm going to look for the 5 biggest companies that I know because it's about status. And I need to make sure that I look for those big companies. It's great to do that, but don't narrow your focus. Look at other organizations. Most companies out there are small, medium size, not large. And don't always look for the title, the job title. So you're looking for a VP, you're looking for a director for higher HR. They may not necessarily be the one who's hiring you. They could be a friend, it could be the mom on the street you're talking to. It could be the admin assistant in the front desk. So you really need to be open to all areas. So don't be so narrow focused. And I think the other last one is be persistent. So you went for an interview, didn't get it, don't worry, move on, you learn from it, you go to the next one. So have grit, be persistent, stay persistent, because you will eventually land that job that you're looking for.
Great. Yeah. Oh boy, these are really good points. These are really strong points all the way through. So I agree with all those. I'm going to add. Okay, but yes. If I only had 3, I would have used those. But I'm going to add to them. If you don't package yourself right, and then you start trying to make networking connections, you look silly because all you're doing is showing people how you haven't prepared. So I want everybody, to do the basic things on LinkedIn. You have a background picture, you have a head and shoulders portrait picture, you have a tagline with searchable words, you have an about essay with 2,000 characters showing your experience and your goals. All of that stuff really matters. When you're networking, the way I encourage people to do it is to ask for advice. And asking for advice always is, you give a compliment, you make a request. That is the format of asking for advice. So I encourage everybody not to ask for jobs, not to ask for references. It is, I see you have this role. How did you, what were your career steps to get it? Or what kind of candidates are they looking for? Or just keep it as neutral and as safe as possible, because Han's 100% right. It may not be tomorrow. It may be down the road, but it's going to be valuable. And it's going to be valuable, like for instance, I recently took on a new role, and it was because of somebody I had a conversation with 10 years ago. And that person then came and said, would you be a director of this organization? And I was really flattered. And that person had been, behind the scenes watching. So even, 58-year-old Peter, who was born to privilege in Canada, still gets, a reference helping me. And so I love that. I love the fact that even I can get a boost and get support. So I would say, make sure you package your LinkedIn properly and your resume and the whole package. Make sure too that you network properly by asking for advice. I think that is really super key. And also make sure you understand how to target companies. So the reference part and that part is tough. That networking part is tough because it's still so vague, but targeting companies is not tough. You systematically identify the companies you want to approach, you research those companies, you look and see what those roles are, you research who's in those roles, and then you can see where you might make a fit. And with every company you look at, there's always a competitor, and they have the same jobs over there. So those would be my 3 tips. Package yourself, network properly, target companies.
Thank you for actually adding to those tips. These have all been really wonderful tips and advice over here. Let's also briefly now look at supply chain in light of COVID-19. How has the industry been impacted, and what do you see as the future going forward?
All right, so I'm going to take that one. It has changed dramatically, as you know. In my company, we're a bit of a niche, so we've been lucky. Companies around me have closed. Other companies, mainly because we have a jam up in PPE coming from China, and so we have things that can't get on planes, and even our normal business can't happen. We also have companies that can't receive goods because their warehouses are closed because they're using protective measures. And then we also have many routes that have closed, like South America has been a big one for us, and with Air Canada not flying there, that becomes very difficult and very complicated. So from the availability of jobs, I would say things are not at a standstill, but certainly not what they were. However, the availability of getting to the people who can make decisions, that's raised. Why? Everybody's working from home. It is now acceptable to reach someone online, to talk to them online, have the entire thing online at all levels. You can call a VP, you can call anybody at any level, you can reach out to anybody at any level and have a conversation, whether it be through an email or through a Zoom call or something like that. They're very accessible now. And why is it? We're busy, we're all busy, but the fact is somebody reaching out to me as a supplier, as a partner, and as a potential candidate, I give them all the same treatment. I'm happy to talk to them. Let's see what you have to say. It might be 15 minutes. But I do think what COVID has done is become a great equalizer in that you can use these mediums that you would normally not use. Normally you would have to go and do the paper trail and talk to somebody, a gatekeeper of some kind before you get in. Now you can actually reach that person because that person is online just like you are, is sitting in their office or at home just like you are, and can reach out. So I think that part is great. However, you don't forget to direct the stuff behind you and the kids and the dog and all that kind of stuff and your hair. And but I do believe, so the market is down, don't get me wrong, but things are moving. And so for instance, I will tell you, March sucked, April was great, May was fantastic, okay? And we've had 0 layoffs. We've had people working hard. I have people who are working from home sending me messages and it's 8:19 p.m. So they're still doing calls. So what I see is that COVID has changed things. It hasn't killed things.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. The employers that we're seeing is the number of jobs has decreased for sure, but there's a lot of online interviews. And so for job seekers, we really need to know how to excel in interviewing online. So things that maybe in person you wouldn't even think about, your lighting, your hair, your background, the noise, you really, really need to do exceptionally well in the interview or online. And COVID is one disruption, but we've had, other disruptions in the past, technologies of cloud computing, AI, robotics, changing the way that supply chain works, but other industry works too. So we're always going to have some sort of disruption. The question becomes, how are you going to adapt to it? And so a lot of the questions when we come out of these disruptions, the employer will say, what did you do during this time period? Now, if you said, okay, I pursued some further education and courses online. I did some networking. I volunteered online. Yeah, all those things, it makes you much more, I guess, employable. So disruptions are there, but the question is, what are you doing to adapt to those disruptions?
Shikhi, is there anything you'd like to add to that before we move on to a few more questions that we'll try and answer as soon as possible?
Yeah, just to add that in these dark clouds, the silver lining is there are certain sectors which have become like super busy. Like, for example, my industry, right? We are seeing the peak times, like the volumes are crossing the charts for the peaks because everybody is shopping online, right? Not only, so I'm particularly working with the healthcare. So healthcare, like we supply directly to the hospitals from the manufacturers and these big pharmaceutical companies. So work is more busy. At the same time, requirement of workforce because overstretched. Everybody is overstretched. So there are certain industries. So please keep an open mind and your eyes and ears open that which industry is actually hiring more or becoming. So be flexible, like Han mentioned, adaptability, how quickly you evolve. Speed would be the name of the game right now. I for one, I'm a person who has never, even I was in consulting, I never worked from home because I cannot function at home. Since 2.5 months, I'm very much comfortable now working from home. So adaptation, right? So the quicker you adapt, the easier you will survive. And do look out for industries which are looking for, more employees.
Definitely. Great tips that all of you shared over here. Let's try and quickly take two more questions that I can see in the Q&A tab. We have a few more minutes left. Han, there's one for you from Kay. Now, of course, they're applauding the success that ACCESS Employment provides to professionals over here. They're also asking, are there any specific initiatives to raise the level of awareness of the value add of new immigrants in the supply chain industry?
I would say our strategy is to, sorry, I can't see the question anymore. Our strategy is to assist all newcomers, and supply chain is one sector. We do that several ways. We are part of national conferences and where we provide outcomes of newcomers and the successes of newcomers. We work with over 2,500 employers in the GTA, and we push for the fact that you have so much talent through newcomers. We are involved in research, and so we publish papers with academic partners in our evidence so that they, it confirms our programming, but also the value add of newcomers as well. Everywhere that we can go, doing shows like this, Café New Canadians, we're always making sure that employers, everyone knows the value of newcomers, right? So as much as we can. We're also talking to government, we're talking to employers, we're talking to associations. Anybody that will listen to us, we talk to.
Fantastic. I did notice Liliana reminded us about the Ripen experiential learning too. One of the things that ACCESS does is in part of encouraging people to not only take their program and learn how to be a better candidate, they have this capstone projects that they can use where the teams get into a professional environment. Shikhi, you talked about it with the fact that it actually landed a second person a job. Yes. And the Ripen system is a really effective communication tool that they use. And so it has been really advantageous for both the employer and for the candidates to track projects and to track communication and to grow ideas. And Han, can you talk a little bit about that for just 2 seconds about Ripen?
Yes, sure. So we work with an organization called Ripen Technologies. It's based out of Vancouver and is an online sort of a platform where they allow for employers to come in. And these are employers across Canada that will submit business challenges. So for example, I'm a restaurant. I really need to do demand forecasting because that depends on how many supplies I need or how many staff I have to have. And so my issue is now making sure that I have an effective cost framework. So how do I do that? And so that question gets posed to the candidates. They will work with our academic partners who are experts in the field and coaches, sector coaches that are experts in the field. And they will present a solution to the employer, and the employer most of the time will look at it and implement the solution, but also provide a reference for the candidate should they look for employment and need I guess a person to reference them. So it's a great I guess project that we offer in our bridging programs.
I'm going to throw two things in there too. For the
Peter,
candidates who don't, yeah, for the candidates for ACCES too, you go to the ACCES webpage. There's a full list of webinars and courses and lectures and seminars that you can take that will teach you just so much. And I don't believe people are using those the way they should. Every time one pops up to me on LinkedIn, I go have a look and I learn something new. And so I really think that that is an asset that they're making available to everyone. Please use it. I did notice a question about ATS for resume culling. It is generally larger companies that do it. Although more and more people are just cheating and using the LinkedIn style and just looking for search words, and that's another way of doing it. A company my size, we get candidates coming out the yin yang, but to be honest, it's much more preferred for us to be talking to somebody like ACCES who can screen stuff people for us. It's used, but you can beat it, and everybody knows you can beat it. So I wouldn't be worried about it. I don't think that's a priority for people to be worried about. I think it's much better make those network connections. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, I think one of the questions is also about our online delivery.
Yes.
So because of COVID-19, we've pivoted completely online. So all of our employment services and our bridging programs are online. So yes, you can enroll. So what I would suggest is go to the ACCES website, to the Supply Chain Connections webpage. There are information session dates there, and you can register for them, and it's completely online. You learn about the program. If it's for you, great. Submit your documents. If it's not for you, don't worry. The door is not closed. We have other services that are available for you so that we can help you in finding employment. So everything is completely online, and if you're a little bit more independent, we have online services. So we have resources and webinars that are hosted in our online delivery, and we invite employers such as BDC. We'll talk about, for example, elevator pitch. How do you excel in your elevator pitch? So those are great resources if you want to do a little bit more independent job search. But ACCES is there for you if you want a little bit more assistance or a little bit less. Everything is delivered online right now.
Can I ask a question for Shikhi? So you're back as a mentor and you're supporting this. Would you, even though you landed your job in a week, how valuable was ACCES to you?
Oh, fortunately, I got my joining date for extended like 4 weeks. So out of the 6 weeks of program, I completed I was still there 5th week and I was there. And I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, as much as I enjoyed the Sheridan part, which is more close to heart because it's supply chain and the technicalities you learn about NAFTA and DPP and all. But the first 2 weeks where we talk about the software aspect and we don't realize how important and critical it is, since we are too arrogant at times that we have been working for so long, we just ignore those and take those things for granted. I thoroughly enjoyed those sessions and learned so much from those.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Like for example, somebody in the chat, and again, not to call out, somebody wrote Mrs. Han, right? Something in Canada, you might not want to write it. You might want to write MS, Mrs. and S dot, right? Not Mrs. You don't want to assume. So small things, right? But matters a lot.
Oh yeah,
the
small things matter 100%.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me just to give a profile of my company. So very quickly, we're a freight forwarder. We do the world, but we do a huge focus in South America. We're like we think of ourselves as a travel agent for cargo. We have all the licenses. We're one of the very few companies that are licensed for nuclear. We do a lot of reagents and chemicals. And I love my company. I'm the hawk in MELLOHAWK, and it's been terrific. So, and also every person in our company is a mentor, from the shipper receivers to the receptionist to the operations people. Everybody is a mentor, and they all are participating in their own groups and their own organizations, and then we spread them out as well. And they hated it from day one, but I will tell you, they love it now, because the gratification of seeing success by just telling your story is amazing. So I love my company, and I'm really, really grateful for my staff.
Well, thank you to you, all of you here, Han, Peter, Shikhi, for this wonderful chat today. You know, you've all shared some great tips, you've given great advice, told so much about yourself, encouraged everyone to keep applying, and how is it that they can use their transferable skills in the industry, and that there's still hope despite of COVID-19 situation. So thank you once again to all of you for these tips. As you mentioned earlier, you're open to connecting on LinkedIn. I noticed that, Peter, you've also shared your LinkedIn link right here in the chat section. And definitely, please go on, add him, ask all your questions. I'm sorry if there were more questions that we were not able to answer. We're running out of time. We will have to wrap this up now. But on your screens, you will be able to see links and URLs for ACCESS Employment as well, and their bridging program, which is Supply Chain Connection. You can check it out. You can see exactly what's there in it for you, and all the best for your success over here in Canada in supply chain as well. As for this session, as I mentioned earlier, it's brought to you by New Canadians in association with ACCESS Employment. And you can connect with us on social media. You can connect with us. We're there on all platforms. Another way to keep in touch with our content would be to subscribe to our newsletter. And that way you will get all the content every month in your inbox. We've got more virtual chats as part of Café New Canadians planned for you. The next one will be soon next week. And before you log out over here, I would request you that, there will be a survey popping up on your screen, and it'll barely take just a minute of your time. Please answer that. It'll help us understand what is it that we are doing well over here for you. How is it that we can perform better? How is it that we can reach out and answer your queries better? So please do that. The next session is on your screen on June 3rd. We will be talking about how is it that the Hispanic community has found success over here. As we go on, we will also be addressing other communities, largely to talk about immigrants' journey to success here in Canada. Once again, thank you to all of the participants. Thank you to our guest speakers for a lovely session. I hope we've been useful today. Please stay safe, stay home, and thank you once again.